Hi, in this tutorial, we will be talking about the methods that go with array lists. Before I do that though, I've added a second class here called student so that I could also demonstrate to you that I can create an array list of not only strings or integers or doubles, but I can also do different objects. So I can create an array list of students. We'll just call it students equals new array list, and then just notice that inside, when I do the type, instead of being an integer or a string, etc., it is of type student, and that would allow me to declare an array list of objects, which we'll work with a little bit later. So there are several methods that go along with array lists, and we're going to start with one to go ahead and fill our list. So we're going to work with, how about the names list, just to kind of get used to working with my array list here a little bit. So if I want to add some items to the list, the first thing I'm going to indicate is what list I want to do that with, then a dot, so names dot, and then the function to add is just add. And if I want to just add it right to the end of the list, I can go ahead and just put in a name, Ben. And this would allow me to add something right to the end of a list. Now with an empty list, it's just starting to fill it from the beginning. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a few items here. Sally names dot add. I see I have a typo above. Henry. I'll go in and fix this. Okay, so right now I have an array list called names, and I've added 3 items to it: Ben, Sally, and Henry. So Ben is at index location 0, Sally is at 1, and Henry is at 2. So if I wanted to be able to add something, in a certain location, I can also say names.add, indicate the location that I want it to be at. So say location 1, comma, and then what I want to put in there, Bob. So now Bob has been inserted into the list into index 1, and everything else will slide down accordingly. So if you ever were in computer science principles and you worked with lists, it pretty much is the same thing as that. So Ben is at 0 now, Bob is at 1, Sally's at 2, and Henry's at 3. So that's the add method for array lists. Now the next method would be the get method. So the get method is just going to grab an item out of the array list at whatever index I'm looking for. So because I'm getting something, that means that method is actually going to return something. So I'm going to put it in a system.out, and I'm going to say names.get, and then I want to get whatever's in location 2, in spot 2. So now we can go ahead and just run it. So now we know that Sally should be in spot 2. So if I do a names.get spot 2, you can see that it is retrieving Sally. So .get will just retrieve an item at a specific location or index. So you need to give the name of the list that you're working with. Get means we want to retrieve it, and then the number inside the parentheses is the index of which item you want to retrieve. The next one is set. I can say names.set. Now set is basically there to change an element at a specific spot. So I could say we're going to set whatever's in 3 to, a new name, Mark. So now my array list would have, instead of having Henry in spot 3, that's going to change to Mark. So let's just test this out, and we're just going to print out the whole array list so that we can see that. So we're going to print out names, and I'm actually going to go ahead and insert this line of code before I set it to Mark as well, so we can see what the list was when we started and what the list is now that we've changed something in it. So you can see that my array list was Ben, Bob, Sally, and Henry, and now it's Ben, Bob, Sally, and Mark, because Henry has now been set to a new value of Mark. So when you use the .set method, you're using the index that you're setting it at, and what you want to set it to. Now I could also do something a little bit tricky with that. I could say names dot set 1 comma names dot get 2, and that would basically set index 1 to whatever I get at 2. So Bob is at 1, Sally's at 2. So now if I were to run this again, you should see Sally showing up twice because we took that value and replaced Bob with it. So just to kind of show you how you can intertwine them together a little bit too. Another basic method of array lists is how to get how many items are in it. I can just say names.size. And unlike with arrays, when we use .length and we don't need parentheses with it because we're not really working with a class, when you work with array lists, size is a method, so it is going to have empty parentheses, and you can see it's printing out that the size is 4. And then the last method that we're going to work with is the remove method. And the remove method will basically take an item out of the array list. So I can say names.remove 1, and it's going to remove whatever is in spot 1. So if I go ahead and print this again so we can kind of see what happens there. As you can see, it removed the Sally that was in spot 1 and everything else slid over. So it's really important that you kind of keep track of what's going on. This type of question where you have a bunch of adds and sets all in a row is a real common multiple choice question where they added some items and set some and remove, and you have to keep track of how things are moving. So you always need to remember that when you're working with an array list and you are removing items, things are getting moved down, back down the list when you do that. And it's just something that you need to consider. But these are the basic methods with an array list. The other thing I do want to mention, just to be careful of when you're using remove, I just want to indicate again that we're removing at an index number. So if you did have an array list of numbers, you basically be careful that you can't ask it to remove 3 and think it's going to go through and actually remove number 3. It's going to be removing from an index. And another side note with the remove method actually does return what it removes. So I could say names.remove 0. So it should be removing the first item in the list. And so not only does it remove the item, but it would actually return that item as well. And that pops up every once in a while in AP questions. I don't see it a ton when I'm actually coding, but that's just something to note, that the remove method can technically return something if you want it to. So there's a quick intro of ArrayList methods.